The purpose of this video is to provide information on the environmental development permit areas that border Kootenay Lake in the regional district of Central Kootenay. In this video, we'll cover some background information on environmental DPAs, including their purpose, objectives, guidelines, and exemptions. If you're unfamiliar with what these areas or permits are, check out our video on development permit areas and development permits. A link is in the video description below. So what exactly are environmental development permit areas? Well, when we think about how development permit areas are used around Kootenay Lake, they're designated for the protection of the natural environment, its ecosystems, and biological diversity. They're a tool that is used to make sure that development gives the natural environment around Kootenay Lake room to function properly. And they're used to ensure that we understand the impacts of harmful development like this, which has the effect of degrading the aquatic environment over time as shoreline habitat is destroyed and not properly considered or restored after it's disturbed. Environmental DPAs make sure that consideration is given to more environmentally friendly forms of development, like this, which gives the shoreline room to breathe and minimizes the impact that human disturbance has along the shoreline, in turn creating a healthier Kootenay Lake. So now that we know a little more about environmental DPAs and where they come from, we'll talk about the areas that they cover around Kootenay Lake. This map shows the electoral areas around the lake. If you live in electoral area A or E, the development permit area covers all space within 15 meters or about 50 feet of the natural boundary of Kootenay Lake. And in electoral area D, it covers all space within 30 meters or about 100 feet of the lake. At this time, there is no environmental DPA in place for electoral area F. It should be noted that these DPAs can also cover rivers, creeks, wetlands, and some ravines. So it's important to speak with the planning department at the RDCK to make sure you have the correct permits in place before starting any work that might disturb these sensitive areas. So now that we know where the environmental DPAs around Kootenay Lake are, what exactly are we trying to accomplish with them? Well, first, DPAs try to protect Kootenay Lake's aquatic habitat from the impacts of development along the shoreline. Next, they try to conserve and enhance Kootenay Lake's riparian areas to make sure that these important areas can continue to do the many jobs that they do, including naturally filtering water, protecting against flood and erosion, and pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, just to name a few. And finally, environmental DPAs seek to restore Kootenay Lake and its riparian areas where disturbance has already happened. So how is it that we achieve these objectives that we've laid out? Simply put, the answer is with development permit guidelines, which are the criteria that need to be met in order for the RDCK to issue a development permit to work in a development permit area. Currently, there are 4 guidelines in place for the development permit areas around Kootenay Lake. The first requires that a development permit be issued before certain activities take place within the development permit area. These activities include the removal, alteration, disruption, or destruction of vegetation, disturbance of soils, construction or erection of buildings and structures, creation of non-structural impervious or semi-impervious surfaces, flood protection works, construction of roads, trails, docks, wharves, and bridges, provision and maintenance of sewer and water services, development of drainage systems, development of utility corridors, and subdivision. The second guideline requires that for any of the activities previously mentioned, the proposal must first be assessed by a qualified environmental practitioner, or a QEP, or a registered professional biologist, or RP Bio, using the Riparian Areas Protection Regulation established by the provincial government as used elsewhere in the province. The third guideline requires that the QEP or RP Bio submit a report that certifies they are qualified to do the assessment, follows the assessment methods laid out in the Riparian Areas Protection Regulation, confirms that the proposal will not have a negative impact on the watercourse, in this case Kootenay Lake, and ensures the criteria of the Riparian Areas Protection Regulation have been fulfilled. The fourth and final guideline clarifies that other requirements of local, provincial, and federal governments still apply. Some examples include building permits, provincial permits like water licenses and other water authorizations, federal regulations like the Fisheries Act, as well as the Species at Risk Act, legal agreements like environmental no build, no disturb, or floodplain covenants, and other DPAs. Ultimately, these four guidelines are in place to ensure that we are being responsible stewards of both fish and wildlife habitat and doing what we can to minimize our impact on the natural environment. The last major piece for environmental DPAs we'll cover is the situations where a development permit is not required for work within an environmental DPA. The first exemption from development permit requirements is for existing construction, alteration, addition, repair, demolition, and maintenance of farm buildings and agricultural activities, which can include the clearing of land for agricultural purposes. The next exemption is for existing institutional development that does not contain any residential, commercial, or industrial use. The third exemption is for the construction, renovation, or repair of a permanent structure if the structure remains on its existing foundation. If the foundation is moved or extended, a development permit is required. The final exemption is for activities where the conditions of the DPA have already been met, or a development permit has already been issued for the project. We hope that this has been an informative video to help better understand what environmental DPAs are, why they're important, and when you do and don't need a development permit for a project you're working on. For more information, visit the community planning page on our website at rdck.ca. Here you'll be able to find more information on land use planning. And you'll be able to see the current planning projects that the RDCK is working on, like the Kootenay Lake Development Permit Area Review, which is a project that is currently underway at the RDCK to better understand how well the environmental DPAs that I've just gone over in this video preserve the values that we all hold for Kootenay Lake, and where we can make some changes to the DPAs to be clearer and to better address some of the concerns that we have related to Kootenay Lake. If you'd like to learn more, visit our project webpage for updates on the project, answers to some of the most frequently asked questions, and for information on opportunities to participate and provide us with your feedback.